Thank you for having me. I'm Sophie. I am a developer, React, Kotlin, bits and bobs. And I am here today to talk about talking talks. It's basically, it's a talk that is aimed at encouraging people to give more talks, whether it's at a meetup or conference. And it started back when I did not switch this on. Hang on a second. There we go. How not to give talks. Okay, so this was me in March. I gave a talk at a conference, React Fest in London, about something to do with Redux. And I had no idea what I was doing. It was my first ever talk. I was encouraged to give the talk by some people in the community that I knew. And so I did what any kind of social media obsessive would do. I posted on Twitter asking people for help. And I thought I might get a few good suggestions from some of the people I follow. And it was actually, it blew up a bit. I had to turn notifications off for a while. But some of the feedback that I got from people who had done loads of conferences, from some people who'd done a few, was just brilliant. And I ended up writing a blog post about it, and then I turned it into a talk. And because the kind of stuff that they were telling me was too good to keep to myself. And it really helped me give my first talk. And so now I want to help you give your first talk as well. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. Possibly one of the hardest things about giving a talk is actually thinking of something to talk about. And I mean, I'm kind of a hypocrite in that I'm actually not very good at this bit. Thinking of idea is not easy, because often these conferences want something really original. I've definitely submitted a load of ideas of stuff that's pretty much old hat by now. So I asked some more people that I knew how they think of ideas. So this is something I really enjoy. So Sarah Vieira is a developer for YLD, which is an agency, and she describes conference-driven development as you look up something you want to learn, you submit a talk about it, you cry if you get accepted because then you have to learn the thing, and then you learn the thing and do the talk. So this is quite a cool one. So, for example, you might want to look up some of the weirder web APIs out there and learn, and then say, okay, I'm going to learn how to use the web audio API. And so I'm going to submit a talk where I'm going to show you how to build a functioning keyboard in React using the web audio API. And then when they inevitably accept you, then you've got to actually learn how to use the web audio API. But, I mean, if you work really well with a bit of fire under your heels, then that's obviously a really good way of doing it. So Yanni is a developer at Formidable Labs, and this one is actually what drove me to do my talk on Redux sagas. So you're having a conversation with someone and you'll mention something and they'll be like, oh, what's that? Oh, I thought everyone knew about this. And then they're like, no, I've never heard of this. And so that's a talk. So I was chatting to my friend and I said, oh, we use Redux sagas in this project. And she said, oh, I've never used them before. And this was my first React project. I just thought that was what everyone used to make API calls with Redux, and apparently no. So I ended up just doing a talk about it, and it was really popular. So that was really good. So if someone mentions that something you've talked about is unusual or they haven't really heard much about it, then you might want to think about doing a talk. Even if it's just the basics, it can be a really good opportunity for someone to learn something new. And there are usually two typical talk lengths at conferences. So it could be a lightning talk, which is 5 to 10 minutes. That was the length that I did. Or a longer talk is about 20 to 30 minutes. And typically anything longer than that, people start to get a bit distracted. So that's kind of the sweet spot. So once you've actually applied for the conference, and if you've got accepted, congratulations, you've got to actually start putting the work in. And so preparing your slides, most people would make slides for their talk. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I did. It was brilliant. And a lot of conferences will provide mentors to help you write your talk, so people who have experience in giving conference talks. Or they might just be able to listen while you run it through, just to check it through afterwards. Also, like I did ask on Twitter, people really do love to help. It's a very supportive community. Use your network. So all of the people in this room constitute a network, as well as people you work with and other people that you've met through other jobs as well. When it comes to actually putting slides together, there's loads of different platforms that you can use. So Keynote is what I personally like, Google Slides, PowerPoint, and if you want to be a real nerd about it, you could use something like Reveal or Spectacle, which are JavaScript libraries. And actually, after watching a talk on someone showing how they use Spectacle, I'm probably going to use that for my next one because it's really cool. So it's a really nice way to actually use React features in your presentation. And I watched someone doing a talk on D3, which is like a charts library, and he did some really awesome stuff right there in the slides using it because it's literally just code. So they're really good for proper code talks. Readability is a really important thing. Use large text, clear fonts, high contrast. So it's really important to have high contrast between the text and the background so that people in the back can see it, and also people who maybe have visual impairments. And don't use colour as a distinguishing feature. So if you've got maybe 2 points on your screen and one of them is red and one is green, some people who have difficulties perceiving colour might not be able to see the difference. If you want a nice font, Google Fonts have some really nice ones as well. And just make sure that it's readable from the back of the room, basically. Bear in mind that the screen could be obscured right at the bottom. You might be standing in front of it. And some people at the back might not be able to see the bottom of the screen. So if you're going to put something like your name or Twitter handle on the slides, a good tip is to put it in the corner so that everyone's going to see it. So when you actually come to put your slides together, it's a really good idea to put them in such a way that you're telling a story. So you're not just listing a series of facts, you're kind of working towards an end goal. So in this talk, I'm taking you right from the beginning of choosing your ideas all the way through to actually delivering the talk on the day. So a couple of suggestions that I got were to that effect. So sharing a story, not a series of facts. And Dan Abramov, that guy from React, talks about having one idea to center your talk around. So if you think about it in terms of, if I were to cut stuff out of this talk, what's the one thing that I want to put in these people's heads? And that helps you decide what to edit, so you know what you really don't want to lose. Also, try not to have too much text on one slide. So your points should be kind of really to the point. They should be concise, and you should be able to talk around them. So once you've practiced enough, you should be able to expand on those points as well. And then, yeah, you can make another version to share afterwards. So the version of this that I'm going to share afterwards will have some more notes and more detail as well. Generally speaking, if there's a lot of text on the slide, then people are just going to read it and they're not going to listen to you. Also, don't use too many GIFs, as tempting as it is. The odd one is fine, but again, really distracting, and it can actually stop you from getting your points across. When it comes to putting code on your slide, that's kind of the same thing with text. Like, you don't really want to put too much code on. And actually, that's something I learned from my talk in March. I definitely used too much code. So something that I saw that was really good that someone else did was they have their code on their slides, but they have it all kind of faded out, like they turn the opacity down, and then they just have line by line when they're taking you through the code. That line is the only line that's really visible, so the audience know exactly where to focus. So yeah, the less code, don't use transitions that are too long. The less code that you show, the better. So you're kind of talking about the important concepts, and you can always share the code afterwards, or you could even put it on GitHub and invite people to go to the repo themselves. And yeah, if you're using something like Spectacle, there's a really cool thing that you can use that actually just cycles through the code like that. It's another reason I want to use it. So once you've actually put your slides together, it's time to start practicing. So you've got to do it as much as you can. So practice. It's all about how you deliver it as much as what you're saying. So if you haven't practiced, then it's going to come across because you're not going to know what you're talking about, basically. It also helps you to know how long your talk's going to take. So an event like this, it's kind of less important because it's a bit more flexible with time. But an actual conference, like, you could actually get cut off if you run over. So it's really important that you know how long your talk takes. A really good chance to try out your talk is at meetups. So I ran my talk first at a React meetup in London before I did the actual talk, and that helps you to understand what kind of questions the audience might ask if you're taking questions, and also just like how it comes across. It's nice when you see people like nodding in the audience, because you know that people are agreeing with you or learning stuff, and people do tend to come up afterwards and talk to you about it. So it really helps you to understand what works and what doesn't. And don't script it as well. So this is really tempting to write down everything from the introduction to the jokes that you're going to make. But ultimately, it doesn't really work because it can sound really wooden. But also, if you lose your place, it's really hard to find where you are. And you might not be able to see your notes either, which is a bit difficult if you're relying on those. I've been to quite a few meetups and where basically I've had to send my slides to someone else because they've got some weird display set up and the screen's mirrored, so I can't actually see the notes. So that's where practice really comes in. So Yanni suggests rehearsing 3 times. So first on your own, and second with a supportive audience, and finally a smaller local meetup. So that kind of just helps you build up your confidence as well. And for me, like, I tried it with my husband, who is not he's kind of technical, but he's not a developer. He doesn't work in tech. And actually, the feedback that I got from him was more about how I delivered it, not necessarily what I was talking about, but the manner and just the way that I was giving the talk, and that really helped me. So don't underestimate your non-technical friends and partners. And yeah, I cannot emphasize how important practice is. So if you haven't practiced, you will run over. Rehearse the whole talk to an empty room and then to an audience. So Dan said that his first talk that he ever gave was half an hour, and because he hadn't really practiced it, he only got through half the slides in the end because he ran over. So once it comes to actual technology, like, despite the fact that we all work in tech, we know that tech can be a pain in the arse. So it's not always your friend, even if you're giving a tech talk. So there are some common pitfalls to look out for. So don't trust the Wi-Fi. Never trust the Wi-Fi. I've been to a tech conference where there was no Wi-Fi and no power either, so that was fun. So if you're relying on any kind of internet connection, try and have an offline backup or some kind of way of getting the information that you need without Wi-Fi, especially when you're in a room full of developers who are all using the same Wi-Fi. It can be really unpredictable. And don't expect that you'll have signal either. It's never guaranteed. So if you're planning to tether in a case of emergency, you can't guarantee that's going to work either, I'm afraid. Keep a backup of your slides and a backup of that backup and a backup of that backup. Maybe on a USB stick. So, I mean, you can have one on Google Drive or something, but then, of course, if the Wi-Fi is not working, you need a way to get to it. You can always send it to the organizer ahead of time so that someone else has it on their computer. Find out the tech setup beforehand. Check if you need to bring an adapter. Especially if you've got a new MacBook, then you probably will need 12 adapters. Bring dongles and bring a clicker as well. So I didn't think of this until someone mentioned it to me. I got this for £6 off Amazon. It's absolute cheap rubbish, but it works perfectly. So that's really cool, and I look like a pro. So definitely recommend. And when it comes to demos, should you do a demo? This is risky. It's up to you, but it can be very cool. And as this guy says, people love demos, but it says demos won't work. And Dan goes, "Oh, mine work though." Yeah. I've seen some great demos, but I've also seen some demos that would have been great, but they didn't work. So one guy was showing some awesome in-browser Bluetooth stuff, like actual interacting with Bluetooth from inside of a browser using an API, and it was amazing, except that everyone's phones were interfering with the Bluetooth, so it didn't work. It's what you get. What's what you get when you have a small room with a lot of people. So what is worth doing is, I mean, if you really want to have a demo, have a plan B. And also don't worry if it goes wrong. People will understand. So this guy, he kind of made a joke about it, you know, people's phones interfering with it. But actually what he did was in the break, he set it up again. And when there were fewer people in the room, it kind of worked a bit better. And he actually got to show it working, which was really cool. So Sarah Drasner, who does amazing things with SVGs, amongst other things, she suggests making demos work offline. So what she does, which I think is really effective, is she actually screencasts herself doing the demo, but she records it in advance. And then for her actual talk, she'll just play the video of her doing whatever she's talking about. And then she can just talk over it in the actual talk. So not only is she doing the demo, but she's able to narrate it rather than having her hands busy or concentrating on actually doing it. So I think that's really effective, actually. And I would almost suggest that works better than live coding, for example. So it's a big day. You're all prepared, you're all practiced, you're all ready to go. Wear something with a collar and a waistband. So this is, I suppose, more for women. Don't wear a dress because unless it's got a collar and a waistband, because you might have a clippy mic and then you need actually somewhere to put it. So there are kind of 3 types of mic that I've seen at conferences. So this is what I like to affectionately call the Britney mic. And this usually has a battery pack on the back, and it just hooks over your head. So I don't need a collar for this, but I do need a back pocket or some kind of waistband. I've also had a clip mic, which tends to go on the collar or in like a shirt pocket or something. Again, that would have a battery pack. Or a handheld one, which is less convenient, especially if you're doing stuff with a keyboard. But then you would be all right wearing whatever, really. Wear comfy shoes as well, because you're going to be standing up for a little period of time as well. Don't forget to stay hydrated as well. You don't want your voice to start cracking all over the place. If you've got a conference lanyard, it's a good idea to take it off. If you've got like rattly jewelry, take that off as well, because it will be picked up in the microphone. Make sure you turn off notifications. You don't want people buzzing you. Like, people are going to be tweeting about how amazing your talk is all the way through your... Like, I look like I'm not listening when I'm watching conferences, and it's just because I'm tweeting like, oh, this is really good. But yeah, if you've got your notifications on, then it will just go off throughout the whole talk, so you want to turn those off. And yeah, you've totally got this. Like, everyone in the room is on your side. So Henry Helvetica, who's a seasoned speaker, suggests airplane mode, turn off Wi-Fi. Yeah, if people are loving your talk and tweeting non-stop about it, you'll get notifications, and now you get it on your watch, you get it in your phone, on your laptop. Like, for God's sake, turn off Slack as well. And yeah, it just turn everything off. And yeah, when it comes to nerves, like 10 seconds before the talk, so 10 seconds before my React talk, I was like shitting bricks. Like, I was so nervous. But then I got on stage, and then the nerves just dissipated. And like, my absolutely rubbish advice is think of something that you've done that was like really scary, and it won't seem nearly as bad. So I thought of the time that I went on some terrible team building weekend at work, and they made me go on a zip wire, and I hate heights. And I was just thinking, oh, this is nowhere near as bad. And it made me feel a lot better. So that's my tip for you. But yeah, once you get into it, it does actually become really fun. Like, you're in a room full of people who are there for the same reason as you, because they like this technology that you're talking about. And in a case of a conference where there's like several tracks to go to, they've come to your talk because it sounded interesting. So they're interested. So what could possibly go wrong? When you're actually giving the talk, don't forget to breathe. You'd be surprised how easy it is to forget to breathe. You're totally fine to pause to take a sip of water. You can even script it in. You can make notes for yourself to actually stop and take a drink. You can move around a bit. You don't have to stand rigid behind the laptop. And yeah, slow down a bit. I'm not very good at that. But yeah, it's better for you if you're not rushing through it as well. And if you're really nervous, just pretend that you're not. Like, that's ridiculous advice, but actually projecting it is almost as good as having it. And the more that you project that you're confident, the more that you'll actually start to feel it, and you'll forget that you're making it up. And yeah, no one knows what your talk was actually supposed to be like. So you could just pretend that everything was fine, and no one would ever know any different. If you make mistakes as well, like, just kind of correct yourself and then move on. Like, you'll notice your own mistakes 100 times more than anyone else. And yeah, no one's gonna sit there in the audience and go, oh, they stumbled over their words a few times, this is rubbish. So yeah, everyone is just gonna enjoy your talk no matter what happens. So yeah, everyone's rooting for you. This is my happy slide. This is a nice supportive slide, right? Everyone's rooting for you. The audience is on your side. They want you to succeed. And enthusiasm is viral. So if you enjoy what you're talking about and you have a lot of enthusiasm for the subject, the audience will share that. I've been in a few, I'm sure we've all been in talks where the person is just kind of, they seem a little bit bored and you're just kind of sitting there going, why are you giving this talk? Like, you clearly aren't that interested. Or the ones where they're just trying to kind of sell some obscure product when you're actually there just to learn about new stuff. So, you know, it's you know, if you enjoy yourself, people are going to enjoy that talk. And when it comes to taking questions, this is kind of, I know a lot of people are quite shy about this because you don't really want to be put on the spot. Ultimately, if you know your topic well enough, then it shouldn't be too hard to actually answer questions on it. But don't forget to repeat the question to the audience if they don't have a microphone, because not only if you're recording it, it's helpful to have a record of what that question was, but for everyone else in the audience, it helps if they know what the question was. And it's okay to say you don't know the answer. You can't know everything. You can always just say, I don't know, I know where I might look the answer up to that, or yeah, just ask someone if someone else in the audience does know the question. Then you can start a conversation. And you don't have to take questions at the end as well, which is a really good point. So my first conference, we didn't have questions at the end. And so you just invite people to come up to you in the break, and it's a lot less scary. And I'd like to say a big thank you to all of these people who gave me the amazing advice that I've completely plagiarized. You can find me on Twitter. I have 2 underscores in my name because the other one was taken. There is a blog post of this talk on Medium, and yeah, 2 fantastic articles. So how to write a successful conference proposal, and tips for public speaking by Joe, who I actually believe came here a few weeks ago. So I'm going to share these slides around afterwards, so really useful. But I hope that you will all be inspired to go away and give talks, especially women. We need more women speakers, please. And yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a microphone, so there is no need for Sophie to repeat the question.
Love it.
Do we have any questions?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
How would you deal with being put in the position where you've done the talk, you've rehearsed it, you've planned it to the nth degree, and then they cut your time?
So if they cut my time after we'd agreed the time, I'd be pretty annoyed. And I'd hope that they'd give me enough notice. So if you're kind of about to go on stage and they say, okay, we've had to, you know, we'll have to squid you into 15 minutes. I mean, that's a pretty poor show, to be honest. But I suppose if you kind of got your central point of your talk that you know that you really want to get across, it helps you to really know which slides are the key ones to talk about. And I suppose if you slice the end of your talk off, then you could always say to people, I've had to cut this short, but you know, I'm going to share the slides around, and if you want to talk about what if you want to find out what I was going to say, then come find me afterwards. Yeah, that would be a really tricky situation, but if you've got that kind of key point that you want to get across, then that really helps.
Cool, thank you.
Any more? Yeah.
Oh, I got one at the back and one at the front.
It's not a question, but I just want to share a horror story.
Oh, good.
For if anybody, you can laugh at my pain, but also if this is relevant to you, like, bear it in mind. I gave like a really quick talk not too long ago. Like, fortunately, the talk was pretty immaterial. I was basically doing a really long demo, but the guy it was the first time I'd ever used a Britney mic, as you say, and the guy set it up like really close to my face, not accounting for the fact that I had a beard. So, and the sound in the venue was kind of poor. So every time I opened my mouth to say something, I would get like half a word out, and then there'd be like a minute of screeching feedback, and like all of the like people doing sound would just freak out. So yeah, if you've got a beard and you're going to use a Britney mic and it starts going absolutely haywire, like, move it away from your face, because I just freaked out and didn't know what to do and just went straight to my demo.
I definitely found that when I had a beard, it was much better to adjust it first. But no, I mean, if your sound, they should really let you sound check it first. So I tried on the mic before we got started to check the sound. So yeah, it's totally not your fault. But that is a kind of risk of sound, is that inevitably something will go wrong. But hopefully they should have a backup as well, different kind of mic.
We have one at the back, I think. Was it?
I was just going to ask, how long would you set aside to prepare for a half an hour talk?
So how long? I think, honestly, it depends on the event. If it was a conference, I spent ages on that. It was 10-minute talk, but I spent so long on that. And it was my first as well. I feel like the more that you do it, the easier it gets, especially depending on what the subject is, if it's a subject you know really well as well. So, I mean, this talk I keep rolling it out. It's great. I barely have to do anything. So once you get a really good talk, people will really love you to repeat it. But I find that, I don't have to spend as long on this now, but I did take quite a while putting it together. So kind of refining your slides, running it quite a lot of times to various different people. I used to give talks at work as well, like we had lunch and learn type sessions, which were a really great place to get feedback as well. But I definitely hear stories about people going to conferences and like literally doing the slides on the plane. So, I mean, if that works for you, fine. I would not be able to do that. I think it's more it's totally personal, basically. But it's just until you get to that point where you feel, yeah, I can totally do this. I've got this. I've practiced it. So it depends on. That's a really rubbish answer, but it really depends on you. But there is no right answer to that question.
It depends is always the answer.
Yep.
If you're a developer.
It's true.
Oh yeah, are you sure? Oh no, you got me curious.
Question over there. We've got a question.
Any more? You're keeping me fit. Oh, sorry.
Hello, thank you very much. What was the kind of trying to think of the word, kind of like process for once you got accepted, that kind of thing, so the back and forward, how did you deal with that? Like for getting to the conference, kind of them accepting your talk. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So yeah, the talk that I was quite fortunate in that I got in through a meetup that I go to in London. It was React meetup, where the company that sponsored the meetup were actually sponsoring the conference and they were organising it. So they'd actually been looking for some first-time speakers. So part of me thinks that was the only reason I got in, but it was actually great because it meant that I really got a feel for what it would be like to actually do a proper conference talk, and I got the practice for when I inevitably got rejected for the next few conferences I applied to. What happened was I got accepted and was absolutely terrified, and then you get an email from the organisers with like all the information you need. They sent a speaker pack, which was like a horrendously long PDF with a lot of information about like where I needed to be, what the setup would be like. They often have a speakers dinner the night before, which is really nice because it means you get to meet the other speakers. And there's always some speakers who come from all over the place, so they don't really know anyone. So it's really nice to make them feel welcome. And there's always information about like travel and the venue and stuff like that. And also, I was offered the chance to run my talk with a mentor, so someone who was from that company that was sponsoring it, who had basically done talks before and wanted to help people who hadn't really done them. So that worked really well. A really good conference organizer should just be able to answer any questions that you have, really. They should just offer you the support you need if you need it.
I think you might have answered a few things in the talk there, but I wonder if you had any extra advice about speaking confidently and dealing with nerves after you get on stage. You know, if you start to maybe have a panic attack or something like that.
Well, but you laugh, but it might happen, right? Like panic attacks are a really real thing, and especially if you are prone to nerves, it's horrible. And ultimately, I'd hope that the audience, and as audience members, you should be like, I guess, just nice enough people that if someone is on stage having a panic attack, you wouldn't go, ha ha ha, like that person's having a panic attack, what the hell? Like you'd be understanding, right? So I think that kind of comes down to the fact that you're in a room of people who have similar interest, and you've got to remember that they are on your side. So like I'm absolutely freezing right now, and like I'm just like slightly shivering. So I'm trying to keep talking, and I'm just like, am I getting the words out? Like, so it's. But I know everyone else is freezing right now because there are people wearing coats. It's that kind of solidarity. And like we're devs, right? We're a bit of a weird bunch. So I like to imagine that we're all kind of here in our shared weirdness, and everyone has something, right? Everyone has something that bothers them, or something that worries them, or something that they struggle with. And so you're not going to be the only person on stage who is terrified being on stage, but you're already like achieving so much more than you were 10 minutes ago by just being on stage. And that's pretty amazing. And if you are suddenly unable to remember what you were saying, you can have some notes. Like if you're not sure you're going to be able to see your speaker notes, like have a note card with you, like pen and paper if you can remember how to use one. And and you can just stop, take a breath. You can even just say, sorry, I'll just be a minute. And no one's going to chastise you or cast you out of the tech community for being a bit nervous. It's better that you take that time to actually get back to kind of normal levels, and then just kind of carry on as you were. Or you could just, if you've completely forgot what you were saying, just like make a self-deprecating joke like I do and just move on, and no one will be any the wiser.
Thank you.
Seriously cold.
I was wondering whether it was the reverb or you shivering that was making. I think I left some reverb on one of those speakers down there. So
I can work with reverb.
Hey, well done, by the way.
Thank you.
That was excellent. So I wonder if a lot of people never even make it to speaking because they get rejected by a call for papers, and without sufficient feedback, have it put them off. And I know that's happened to me. And I was just wondering how you might reflect on being rejected for a paper, having been accepted for a subsequent one, whether it got to you, whether it didn't.
It's rough, like being rejected, but I mean, the only thing I can suggest is just apply to as many conferences as you can. Like, I mean, there's a lot of conferences, like a ridiculous number of conferences. There's like, I've lost track of how many like React Day conferences there are in so many different countries. And if you do get rejected, it's worth like emailing the organizers to find out why. Like they should at least do you the honor of actually giving you some feedback and why they rejected you. Like for me, I applied to a few conferences, and I think what I was suggesting was perhaps not. It's been done quite a lot, and you don't have to come up with some incredibly new idea. Like there's only so many ideas under the sun out there, but you might be able to offer a new spin on it or show how you've used something that people have talked about, but you've used it for something different. But I would just say don't give up. Like if your talk idea isn't working, then it might be time to think of a new one. But you could always just make a change to it, make a slight adjustment, and try a different spin on it. But just don't get disheartened, because they do get a lot of applicants for various conferences. But yeah, you could always ask on something like Twitter or at these kind of meetups for people to kind of, I guess, give you feedback on your application. So I've got a couple of friends on Twitter who would read over my application and tell me whether what I've got is enough to get me accepted in an ideal world. So it's worth asking people.
Shall we wrap it up? I think
really
the pub has the heating on, so thank you very, very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.